think of KYC the same way. You know, you have to know who you're dealing with to really see if it warrants inclusion into your financial institution. So we're going to go through this today, and we're going to touch on the three components of KYC. In addition, talk a little bit about the current environment we are exploring. Now, as Hemanth mentioned at the beginning, I work for JTM Compliance training. I've been in financial services pretty much my whole career, working in regulatory compliance, whether it's advisory, heading up training functions. So I've seen a lot in my day. Some things will, leave you scratching your head. But the whole point of this is to follow a process. We all have policies and procedures set up in our organization. From our point of view, we need to follow them. So we're going to talk about that and more. So, when we scan the global AML environment, we can start seeing a lot of consistencies about what's going on with regulators. We have some risks that are apparent in our atmosphere. Cryptocurrencies, don't worry, we're not going to talk about it today, but they're making AML change its routine or take into account new situations and new rules. And, these days, it's really about beneficial ownership and understanding the ins and outs of the person or the entity business that you're dealing with. If we don't know who the beneficial owner is of an organization, you have to think about, do you want to deal with them? Is it a shell company or is it something more? So, regulators around the world are looking into these questions, and they want to make sure that, customers that we verify are legitimate and they don't pose any money laundering risks, or they're not on a sanctions list. There's beyond just paying penalties and possibly going to prison. You got to look at the reputational damage it could do to your institution. Now, I don't even have to tell you much, but these are some of the big fines that occurred last year around the world. You're probably familiar with Binance, Crown Resorts, all dealing with AML control issues or reporting, or really the whole premise here is not knowing who their customers are or failing to have a framework for their financial institution. So I'm not going to go through these in detail, but these are some really hefty fines that could result because of failings with your AML compliance program. Now, let's just touch on money laundering, because the premise of money laundering is interesting. Now, you think about it, there are a lot of legal activities going on around the world. They could be drug sales, organized crime, bribery and corruption, and more. A money launderer comes into the equation when, somebody who does illegal activities wants to make their income look legitimate. So one way of doing so is going through the 3 stages of money laundering: placement, layering, and integration. Placement, you hire a money launderer. Don't worry, money launderers aren't on LinkedIn where you search for a job or anything like that. They're a little bit tougher to find. But it's their job to put the money through a cycle and come out clean, so they can purchase jewelry, real estate, and so on, and it looks legitimate. So these are important to understand, and typically money launderers get caught at the placement stage more than anything else. So it's something we have to really take into account when we're monitoring activities for a customer, which is one part of KYC. So I want to just touch on AML compliance program. Per regulations, we all need one. we need an AML compliance program that, mitigates risks or prevents issues. And again, it goes back to policies, procedures, having the right staff, and having the right KYC program so you can find out everything you need to know about an individual before you let them in to be a customer. We can't just let anybody in because the repercussions could be quite severe, as you saw between Binance, Crown Resorts, and now remember those enforcement actions I showed you, those are only the top 5 from 2023. There were many, many more. Now, with an AML compliance program, each program is going to be different because we all deal with different products, services, employees are dispersed on different geographic regions. So it's not a one size fits all. The goal here is to detect suspicious activity, money laundering, tax evasion, and then do the necessary reporting to our regulators, law enforcement, and so on. Because if we find something within our financial institution, it's possible that this individual or customer could have done this elsewhere. And that's why reporting is so difficult. And with the monitoring piece of a KYC program, we'll get to that in a little bit. But I just want you to understand how KYC sits within an AML compliance program. Our compliance programs have to be robust and they have to be real, meaning that we actually have to follow what's in there. And, we could talk about failings at these organizations. They could have everything set up perfectly, but if they have a culture of compliance that's really poor, the motivation to do your job correctly is not at its highest. So that's something we have to consider as well. All right, so let's take a step into KYC. Now, remember, it's know your customer. I gave you an example earlier about meeting somebody new. And, when you meet somebody new outside, just maybe a potential friend, you want to know a lot about them before you consider inviting them to their house, introducing them to the family, So KYC is similar. It's really confirming the identity of an individual that you could potentially be doing business with. And it's a set of procedures that we need to walk through to make sure they are who they say they are. Now, at all jurisdictions around the world, no KYC regulations are the exact same, but they're all very, very close because the regulations serve each territory differently depending on their risk. So it's an important distinction to understand. Now, when we verify information, a driver's and a government ID, passport, whatever it might be, we need to do our checks inside our organization and outside. So when you're dealing with a particular customer, first step is easy. They need to fill in, say, an application listing all their information, address, name, telephone number. And this is the beginning of the process. We want to look through to make sure, based on the information submitted, are there any red flags quite yet? Maybe, maybe not. Because a red flag occurs at such an early process, that's a big warning. And you need to determine, do you want to go on with the KYC process or just tell the customer, wish you the best of luck, go find another account somewhere else. But you have options as a financial institution on what you can do with an individual. You can just flat out reject them, saying that, this customer poses a little bit too much risk for our financial institution. You can let them in and, label them as high risk, which we'll go over enhanced due diligence soon. If they're labeled high risk, there's a little bit more monitoring activities that you do for them as opposed to somebody that isn't high risk. Or, there's something comes up that is just so egregious that you need to let authorities know. It's possible that you might uncover a criminal that you need to let authorities know as well. So my point here is you have options. Now, KYC, it's just having the proper protocols that you can challenge customers along the way or a business entity, because we need to know who they are. If they don't want to tell us who they are, well, they can find an account elsewhere. We can't lose any sleep over it. We have to go by facts. So we need to verify their information. And then once we verify their information, go through the process, we're going to label them either low, medium, or high risk, or any way you want to use the terminology. But it's going to incorporate doing more monitoring than you would for somebody that doesn't pose a risk. So as a financial institution, you have to think about it. If we onboard so many high-risk people, do we need more resources? Do we need better technology? There's ramifications because we have to look at cost. Compliance is expensive. It is, and it's a growing field. Lucky for us. But, there's steps and focus that we need to pay attention to. So I put this together, just simple 5 steps, and it gives you kind of a premise for what we're looking at. So first step, yes, they submit a document and all their information. Remember, that's only the first step. The second step, a KYC analyst or somebody internally is going to do the verification. And when we do verification, there are a lot of lists on a global basis we could bounce a customer off of to see if they say they are who they say they are, or if they're on a sanctions list or something more extreme. So that's that process. And then we want to verify where they're coming from. Are they in a country that's really high risk and we don't want to deal with? Or are they perfectly fine? They live down the street and you actually know them. So there's a big variation between the two. But we need to understand what country they are from, because there are high-risk jurisdictions that we probably do not want to deal with, or we might not be able to deal with at all. So then we want to look through their financial condition. We looked at the documents, we verified all the information for the most part, but, there's still risks. Something doesn't look right. So we have to have our red flag attitude all along the way. Take notes, talk to escalate if possible. Now, for step 5, hey, they're a customer. They're onboarded. Great. Now we have to monitor them. Now, we can have very advanced technology to do our monitoring, or we can have a little bit more simplified approach. Either way, it doesn't matter. Our goal is to make sure that once we let a customer in, they don't deviate from what they originally told us. If they deviate at all, those red flags are going to come up. Alerts are going to be triggered. And there's a lot of investigation to do, potentially, depending on the circumstance. So this is just a high-level view of the KYC process. Now, within the KYC process, you have 3 components. The customer identification program, which we went over a little bit already. You want to verify they say who they say they are. And then the due diligence, right? Customer due diligence is extremely important because we want to know everything about them. Again, I bring up, getting to know somebody who could be a friend. You want to ask them questions. You want to see if they pose risk to you or your family. And that's the way I look at it, how serious it is to make sure that we do what we need to do. And then the third part is monitoring. Again, people could deviate from their original intention, and or maybe one day they roll out of bed and they're presented with an opportunity of a lifetime, an illegal opportunity, and they step on it. So things can happen during the course of a relationship. Now, with SIP, I put something on here about the Patriot Act and BSA, but the point here with SIP, it's a requirement around the world in most jurisdictions, and it allows us to verify identity and make sure we want to deal with an individual. And you need to have a reasonable belief that the customer's identity is true based on the sources of information that you looked at and lists that you looked at to see if that potential customer is on. Is it an entity? If it's an entity or a business, we might need a little bit more due diligence. But we decide this based on our policies and procedures as we go along and do the research. And I'm not going to go through this too much detail. We need the information to verify who they are, whether it's passport, ID card, and all of that. We do need procedures written down for our staff to follow, because if they're not accurate, then the process is not accurate. And every single thing has to be robust, because again, your reputation could take a tremendous hit if you allow somebody who's been, say, sanctioned or is a member of a drug cartel. A lot of customers might not want to deal with you, and rightfully so. Now, PEPs, politically exposed persons. Now, around the world, PEPs have a position of power. They control something within a government, or could be a high-ranking official that could influence others. So we have to make sure whether they are or not a PEP, and what are we going to do with them? It poses a lot of risk for our organization if something happened like bribery and corruption. I'm not saying it happens with all PEPs, but bribery and corruption is a big deal. When you're in a position of influence, you're presented with opportunities. And you really need to determine as a person, are you greedy or not? Or are you going to do the right thing? I went through rejecting a person, but I really want to get into CDD. Now, we all know, hopefully, I'm sorry, are there any questions?
No, Justin. I think we will put like last 10 minutes of the session for the questions. Can you please move the slides, for their reference of the trainees?
Oh, can you see me removing them?
Yeah, can you please move the slides to maybe?
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So with customer due diligence, again, there are steps we're going to take. We want to identify the beneficial owner, and we want to make sure that the process we went through is very robust and nothing fell through the cracks. When you're looking at the potential customers' information, you're going to try to determine where they're located again, their identity, the business they conduct, because they could be in a business that, is conducive to fraud or just high risk. So, that's why we need to know what they do for a living. And, when you go through the process, you're going to determine again, how risky is this person? Are they low risk? They just do typical banking stuff, nothing really out of the ordinary. Are they just medium risk, where they have the potential to get into maybe risky investments, or their background dictates it? or they high risk, potentially someone you don't want to deal with because of what you have to do once you onboard them as far as the monitoring goes. So, then you need to determine what you're going to do. Are you going to just put them through simple due diligence, regular due diligence, or enhanced due diligence? So when you look at this, low risk, simple due diligence, medium could be a regular due diligence, and enhanced due diligence. So it gets more and more extreme depending on the nature of the relationship. Now, with enhanced due diligence, there's a lot of questions to answer. Again, you might be on the border right now determining, should we deal with them or do we just reject them? Sometimes being safe is a good thing when you're talking about regulatory compliance, but we need to know, are they on a restricted list? Are they in any type of list they've been sanctioned, or again, are they in a high-risk country? Certain countries are higher risk than others, and we need to determine that. Again, are they a sanctioned country? High-risk industry? Do we know the ownership structure of their business? Are they not telling us? Which is a huge red flag. Red flags are going to come up during the process, and you have to be very focused on them. Because if you don't handle them appropriately, you're going to have a customer coming on board that could be a criminal, who could be on potential lists that fell through the cracks, and that's not something you want to do. So when you go through enhanced due diligence, there's a reason for it. That this person, based on the information we received so far, is a little bit higher risk than our normal customer base, or within the realm of somebody we want to deal with, even though they pose higher risk than normal. Now, with enhanced due diligence, you're really doing a little bit more than you would with simple due diligence or just regular due diligence. And every part of the process has to be very robust. Like the example I showed you about Binance, $4 billion, that's in USD. Now, $4 billion for AML failings, not doing KYC properly. And I'm not saying your organization is going to get $4 billion fine, but, AML failings are a big, big to do. So as far as what to collect, we talked about some of this already. We do need to know who the beneficial owner is. We need to know the structure, who makes decisions, what percent of an entity do they own? There's got to be a clear understanding of who the owners are based on the due diligence you are conducting. Again, the sector is important. The source of funds. They're depositing money in the account. Where is it coming from? Is it a legal enterprise? Is it a legitimate source? We need to determine that, because again, that could be a big red flag. Now, with sanctions, in our geopolitical world right now, life's a little crazy. We're having issues with Israel and Iran, and we're dealing with the Gaza Strip. We're dealing with Russia, Ukraine. I mean, the list goes on and on. Now, if you have the right technology set up, it's very possible that if you have a name and some information, you could bounce that against a sanctions list to see if this is somebody, again, you want to deal with. But my point here is, you have to make sure that you do every part of that due diligence that you need to do, that you're not allowing in somebody that you don't want. Again, if you meet somebody, say you got introduced to a potential friend, first step, you're not going to let them in their house and leave them alone unsupervised. You have to build that trust. And that's why I use that analogy of meeting a friend. It might get to a point where they stay over one night, or you allow them to go into your refrigerator and make dinner. But you have to get to that point by having the right information. And because of the severity of sanctions, you know, we have the civil penalties, we have possible imprisonment, but the reputational damage it could do to an institution could really hinder its growth for years to come. And we do not want to be in that predicament, because it could mean that, because of these situations, we need to cut staff. We need to eliminate an office. So the repercussions can be felt on and on again. So we have to be very focused. And I'm not going to go into sanctions too much, but when we do our due diligence on a customer, it's all a part of our verification. We need to know our client or your client, and this is where we're going to do our checks. Now, we might have a checklist that's maybe 10, 15 items long, but we need to go through each and every one of them. Now, the monitoring, this is where it gets interesting. Now, first off, hopefully you have the right technology set up and it's up to date. Because if it's not and it hasn't been tested, somebody can get through that you don't want. Monitoring is very important. Remember, like a customer you let in could be fine, very simplified due diligence, no issue. But one day they could be doing a little bit high risk transactions or dealing with somebody they shouldn't be. And you're going to get a spike, meaning you're going to get an alert. So if customers, you think about it, we set up our systems with a minimum and a maximum, and they have to stay within that interior. And anytime they breach, either way, alert's going to be triggered because it could be unusual behavior or it could be illegal activities. And, we need to make sure that everybody says who they say they are, but they do what they say they do. A relationship could change. That's why periodically we have to contact our customers and see if any information changed on their record, or, do they want to explore doing something different with their account. So that time and place will come. Now, with red flags, this is more for your information, and I put this together as a takeaway. When you have a red flag, you need to first figure out what it is. Is it a true red flag? And if it is, well, regardless, you have to do that investigation. And that investigation, it might be time consuming, but you can't just put it on the side and hopefully it goes away. Life doesn't work that way. It only gets worse. So we need to examine all the red flags to see if they are either a false alert, meaning that we could have a system issue and that this is a legitimate customer, to something that we need to really explore. Now, I also put down steps, and these are just broad steps to follow once you get an alert. You want to make sure that the issue, and you get all the information on the issue. You want to let your manager know, or somebody who's in the team lead. Then you got to do the research. If it's a false positive, okay, maybe it's a system problem too that we need to fix. Our transaction monitoring software should be up to date and tested. We need to test our technology. If it's not working one day, we can let in a lot of people that we shouldn't. And then we need to report it to the regulator. Okay, maybe not. But you need to close it out with the customer. And it's possible with the customer, you're not going to tell them everything they need to know about the research, just giving them a thumbs up or thumbs down. And then, step 6, updates to policies and procedures. Maybe during this process, you found something that, wasn't in your procedures, Well, it's a great time to update it. And you might have to do that going forward if other issues arise. So procedures are set, but they're not set in stone, meaning they could be updated or adjusted as things change in the atmosphere. With red flags, I do want to wait, get questions or open up for questions, but I put a lot of details about red flags that you can look at, and I can also answer during the Q&A. But record retention, we can't just throw things in the garbage, delete them, because we need to have those records in case regulators ask for them, or maybe law enforcement. Who knows? But we need to retain our records for a period of time. Now, certain jurisdictions are different with their, record retention requirements. It could be 3 years, 5 years, and so on. And it's important to understand what your record retention regulations are. So again, we might have to look back in the future. You never know, but we have to be prepared. All right, I am ready for questions.
Great, Justin, and thank you so much. From covering from basics of KYC to almost touching base, like all the core concepts of KYC in a very short time. That is really appreciable and giving your insights. And team, if you have any questions, in next 10 minutes, so we have 10 minutes for our Q&A session. So let us know if you have any questions. We are open for any questions, or you have any inputs or discussion points to discuss with us. Feel free to discuss here. So guys, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself and speak, or if you want to text in the group, we are happy to pick it from there as well.
Justin and Hemanth, I do have a question. One question.
Yeah, sure, Irfan. Tell me.
The question is regarding the enhanced due diligence whenever we are doing. So, what can be the extra requirements without the source of funds, without the adverse news media? What can be the extra requirements we can ask for the enhanced due diligence whenever we are doing?
You know, no, good question. Thank you. So, no, it's a good question. It's really when you're getting to the enhanced due diligence portion, you start accumulating this, I guess, profile of this customer, right? And it's going to help you determine which method you're going to use. So, if you get to enhanced due diligence for a customer, there's potentially something not perfect there, something we need to explore. So what you mentioned about the adverse media, we're looking at every source possible because we're investigators. Think of it, we're AML detectives. I love that name. And
Yeah.
we need to figure out whether they're popping up on anybody's radar. And apologies, Irfan, thanks for mentioning the adverse media. I forgot to mention that. That's a strong that's one aspect you really need to look to see if a customer is it part of any issues. Good question.
Great.
Yeah,
And
thank
Justin,
you
we
so
have
much,
one
Justin.
more question. Sorry, I'll take it the next one. So we have one more question from the Deep Sen Gupta in the chat box. So he's asking for additional documents required for performing enhanced due diligence.
So you look at it, every jurisdiction is going to be different as far as what the regulators are going to request. Now, we could start out by getting some basic information and then building it from there, because you might have to go back to the customer and say, listen, we need this, we need that, we might need a utility bill to prove their address. We might need, say, hypothetically, a bank statement to show the source of funds. You have to look at this. It's a process that could evolve from the inception to the end. The customer is going to tell you essentially where you're taking this process. So you just have to listen to them and focus like, well, the customer, there's something wrong here. Let's ask for an additional document to make sure as a financial institution, we feel comfortable. Forget about the customer. It's about us. We have to be a little selfish right now and say, well, we can't deal with them because either they're not submitting documents or that something in the process created too many red flags that we don't want to deal with. Good question.
Hi Hemanth. Actually, I have one question.
Yeah, please go ahead, Rahul.
So for the if the entity is high risk and the entity is also regulated by the regulator, so still we require complete ownership structure like UBO percentage. Yeah, we can leverage the requirement regarding a beneficiary owner.
You know, good question. So beneficial ownership has been a big hot topic from regulators all around the world. UAE, Central Bank of Egypt, there are more and more countries adopting the FATF recommendations, and part of that is about enhanced due diligence. So that's a good thing. We want global consistency. But with enhanced due diligence, there's a set of records that one should be in the procedures that you need to follow, and two are regulatory requirements. So you need to factor both of those aspects in, but then also, it's about the risk-based function of your institution. So you might have a limit because, say, you're a very traditional organization, you don't want any noise, any headaches, so you're not going to deal with anyone who falls on the enhanced due diligence. I hope that answers your question. I think I rambled on a little much.
Yeah. And we have one more query from the group chat box from Abhishek. So he's asking for how do international sanction regimes intersect, with AML efforts? What are the compliance challenges associated with navigating this complex regulatory landscapes?
Well, good question. So, you know, I mentioned a couple of things. How, remember, AML is a global problem, it's not a domestic one. So, it's very important that we have consistency in what we do from nation to nation. But regulations differ. There are some countries that are not adopting the FATF recommendations and might be behind the times. So if you look at every country around the world, it's all different in one shape or form. So we need to really do our jobs internally and look at the regulations that impact us. If you're working for a global organization, I'm just going to throw one out there, Citigroup, HSBC, or whatever. Now, these companies, they have offices all around the world. So you might have to understand the rules and regulations in a particular country. So this is where learning is very important, but it's also based on what your company does.
Yes. Yeah, Justin, we have one more question from the group chat from Bijoy. So he's asking for the best, course for AML and KYC.
The best course? Oh,
Yeah,
I, wait a minute. Wasn't this the best course? Wait a minute.
yeah, it is a very short, like good course. And so guys, I'll take this question here. So Vijay, we have different number of courses, offered by, Justin himself. He's a very leader in the training. He himself own organization called, let me share my screen. Justin, if you allow me to share my screen to just take a 1 minute to just go through what we both offer. So depending upon the requirement, they can take it forward. So guys, Justin is the founder of JTM Compliance Training. So if you go through this website, whatever your requirement is suiting to you, you can just go through it. Okay. So they have regulatory training, KYC training, everything. All the trainings are listed here. Go through it, navigate this training, and also AML Custodians, which is sponsoring this training. So we have this training lineup for fraud. If you are interested to enhance your career into fraud, so Justin himself leading this, the entire fraud training, particularly on fraud prevention. So it is a level one, entire training. So you can apply, after completing this course, you can apply for analyst roles, or you can enhance your course, like your knowledge. And if you want particularly KYC, so we are also offering KYC training here. So I'm sharing this website here, Bijoy, for you. Please go through it for JTM Compliance training website link in the group, and as well as AML Custodians training group link as well. Okay, thank you. I hope it is helpful. We have one more question from I think Raj Purohit Preet. How someone from the non background AML domain can change to KYC?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
So how someone can change their job domain from non AML or compliance background to AML background?
So, I love AML, and I'll tell you why. Because as someone who trains this all the time, you never run out of material. There's always something out there you could talk and educate people on. And I think AML is one of the most interesting fields for compliance. Now, if you're in a non KYC role right now, it's also just about learning what goes on, understanding the step by step, and just educating yourself. I mean, there are certifications that you could take. GCI, well, I belong to, is one that could help you in your career. But it's hard to get a KYC job when you don't have that background. So that's why I say having the educational requirements will help build your profile so you can get in the front door. So I would say look at KYC certifications, and as an organization, you can look at my website, or you can look at Global Compliance Institute. And Hemanth, I think I don't know if you wanted to talk about GCI, but I could table that for now.
Yeah. So, guys, we are coming up with a very strong partnership from GCI. So you will hear from us from AML Custodians in the coming weeks time. So we will offer a few global certification from AML Custodians in India, so that everyone can enhance their career actually. Okay. So, guys, we have more 5 minutes. So let me know if you have any questions or anything.
Hemant, I have one question.
Yes,
Uh,
Rahul.
For example, we are doing KYC of government entity, and in
Okay.
government entity there are many board of director and authorized signatory. So we
Okay.
will consider all board of director as a political exposed person because of our entity as a government entity. We will consider only PEP if the director is involved in any political position. Yeah, we will consider all the director as a PEP. So can you please just give your thought?
Yeah. Yeah, Justin, over to you.
Oh, I thought you were going to answer that. It's up to you. I mean, it's based, like, if you look at your institution itself, it's risk based, right? You get to determine what you want to do. If you want to label somebody as a PEP based on based on whatever you establish, that's
Yeah.
fine. I mean, it'll
Yes.
make you sleep better at night. So yeah, you could absolutely do that.
So to add on to what Justin said is, Rahul, for example, it also depends upon your specific policies and procedures, which your organization is following. So generally, like all the director level or board of directors from the government entity are considered as a PEP. However, being government entities, their uh, since it is already regulated by a government of particular country or jurisdiction, their risk level is usually low. I'm not saying it is high, but in general term, like in order to make you understand, generally the risk rating of that particular, if you example, if it is a World Bank is a government entity or a semi-government entity, like see, World Bank, they give donations or give assistance to a particular country for the infrastructure or anything. So everything is legitimate. The funding or the transactions, anyone who is part of the World Bank are they do not have any kind of criminal background. Yeah, they might be considered as not PEP. I will not call it as a PEP, but they might be considered. They might their account might get their names might get screened rotationally, but their risk level at a high level will be low general in terms of general. But again, all depends upon the organization's policies and procedures.
So Hemant, just wanted to understood if the board of director and individual hold any political designation, then only we will consider as a political exposed, right? Political person, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, if we are performing a screening on any individual, and at the time of his screening, we found that the client related to the any politicals, then only we have to consider as a PIP, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank
Okay, I think we can take only one last question as of now. So yes, Irfan, please go ahead.
Yes, Justin and Hemant, I have a question. Okay, so the question is regarding the ownership part. What is the percentage of the in the ownership part we consider as a low risk and we consider as a high risk? Is it really depends upon the procedures and policies of that particular organization, finance organization, or do we have any fixed percentage from the regulators?
So Irfan, to add on to this query, see, it all depends upon your jurisdiction, regulations which the organization is following, and also policies and procedures. So it's a combination of both. So, for example, for low risk clients in US, generally we follow a 10 percentage, sorry, a 25 percentage of ownership. Correct me if I'm wrong. Or else, like if an entity is listed in a New York Stock Exchange, so we
Yes.
don't require
We do,
any
yeah,
owner.
for the Nasdaq or whatever it is, if it is listed in the stock exchange, we don't ask for the ownership only. That's I think what I have done, right? So we don't
Yes.
consider that for the low risk or high risk, whatever it is done. So I was just asking for the entities or the corporates. What is the high risk percentage? That's what my question was.
So it depends upon from organization to organization.
Okay,
So for high
understood.
risk, it is a 10 percentage in general. So for medium risk, it might be 15 to 20 percentage. Low risk, it is in between 25.
25%. Yeah,
Yeah,
25. What I have done also. Okay,
yeah.
no problem. Thank you so much, Hemant, and thank you so much, Justin.
Yeah. So, guys, that's all we have, and I will share a call recording of this webinar. So, please, if you want to just go back and review, please go ahead. And if you want to have a full edge training in given in fraud or KYC or transaction monitoring, feel free to reach out to us. So, I will leave our LinkedIn page here. You can just go through it, or you can just refer to our website. Okay, so you can just connect with us if you have any training requirements, consulting requirements. Let us know. So I just left my website details. We organize comprehensive webinars, workshops that is free on a like a warranty basis, and also on a paid basis as well. So it is very so we are not a commercial organization, because the motive which I have started this organization is to provide a reasonable training for everyone. Okay, with a quality of training. So we have like 2 to 3 set of trainers. Uh, you know, I myself have 13 years of experience in in operations, quality, and training. Okay, so guys, that's all I have, and thank you so much for joining this session. And let me know for 5 minutes, for 1 or 2 minutes, if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer. Okay, if you do not have any questions, then thanks everyone for joining, and